Morning. Today we're going to
Morning.
3, Sutra 9 through 12. So I'm going to start and read 9 through 12 through Patanjali Sutras, and then I'm going to read translations from another sutra. So number 9, the impressions which normally arise are made to disappear by the appearance of suppressive efforts, which in turn create new mental modifications. The moment of conjunction of mind and new modifications is Nirodha Pranayama, Parinama. Number 10, the flow of Nirodha Parinama becomes steady through habit. Number 11, when there is a decline in distractedness and appearance of one-pointedness, then comes Samidha Parinama, development in Samadhi. Number 12, then again, when the subsiding past and rising present images are identical, there is Ekagrata Parinama, one-pointedness. So Patanjali Sutras doesn't give translation, so I'm going to read, and it's kind of long, but I think it'll help, from the Inside the Yoga Sutras by Reverend Jagannath Pereira. Excuse me. Development in Nirodha. Notes on Sutra 3.9 through 3.12. The next 4 sutras deserve a preface because they summarize and expand on the core principle of yoga practice introduced in Sutra 1.2, Nirodha. Nirodha, which can be understood as the process of shifting from object-oriented consciousness to awareness of the inner organ, the mind, is a shift that culminates in the realization of the source of consciousness, the Purusha. Yet the degree of Nirodha necessary to achieve self-realization, I can't say this word ever, realization, can seem like a mountain that looks more massive and imposing as we near it. The primary obstruction to the development of Nirodha is the inclination of the mind to be restless and outwardly directed. This mode of functioning, the predominant characteristic of ordinary awareness, has its roots in subconscious impressions that were created by and remain under the influence of ignorance. That is why development of Nirodha involves restructuring the subconscious mind to allow for a profound change in the way the mind perceives and understands itself and its experiences in the world. We generally function under the sway of a web of subconscious impressions and a mode of mental behavior that generates and sustains a false sense of identity based on the desire to have contact with objects that are regarded as separate from oneself in order to understand and either pursue or avoid them, the expectation that these experiences will bring permanent happiness, a sense of selfhood built upon identification with pleasurable and painful experiences in the world. Sri Patanjali uses the word vrutana, externalization, to characterize this mode of mental behavior and the impressions that support it. First, let's examine the foundation of the subconscious, samskaras. Samskaras are mental modifications that sink to the bottom of the mental lake, where they become potential activators to further thought activity. Samskaras form deep inner structure of the mind that influences all thought processes. They determine much of what constitutes our personality, habits, and behavior, and have a strong sway over the choices we make. They constantly trigger conscious mental activity, which in turn creates new impressions or strengthens ones already lying in the subconscious. Samskaras become dominant factors in determining our character when similar ones bind together to form subconscious tendencies and traits. For example, impressions of fear gather together to predispose us to further occasions of fear that in turn create and strengthen impressions of fear. It is a vicious cycle that is broken by Nirodha. every moment of stillness, focus, and clarity creates impressions of Nirodha. Each instance of Nirodha, of redirecting attention inward, predisposes the practitioner to another. Once firmly grounded in the subconscious, impressions of Nirodha completely just transform how we perceive the world and our self-identity. Samskaras of Nirodha take root more quickly and decisively when moments of Nirodha are vivid, marked by enthusiastic and energetic efforts. When impressions of Nirodha grow sufficiently in number and strength, they permeate the subconscious, replacing impressions of externalization. Over time, samskaras of Nirodha become the dominant influence on the mind's functioning. When this occurs, the mind naturally attains a clear, steady focus and objectivity in its perception. It turns within effortlessly and with great zeal as it searches for the source of consciousness, the Purusha. If Vartana is the obstacle, Nirodha is the solution. Nirodha gains its ascendancy over subconscious activity, not primarily through occasional dramatic breakthroughs, but in small, steady steps. This idea of progressive transformation is central to understanding how advancement is made in yoga, and it appears several times in the sutras. In this introductory sutras of this pada, Sri Patanjali stated that samadhi isn't achieved all at once. Rather, it is a continuum of ever increasing mental focus that progresses from concentration to meditation to samadhi. Then after presenting samyaya, concentration, meditation, and samadhi taken together, as the way to gain intuitive insight, he again emphasizes that progress is made in stages. Now, in Sutra 3, 9 through 12, development in Nirodha is presented as a product of transforming the subconscious through regularity and repetition. There is a mysterious or subtle aspect to our advancement toward self-realization. Most of our efforts produce results that are not apparent because they work on subconscious level. There are times when we may become discouraged, feeling that little or no progress is being made. This group of sutras helps practitioners realize that most progress is made out of the reach of their conscious awareness. Persistence and faith pays off. Each instance of practice, every moment of Nirodha surely adds to the restructuring of the subconscious mind, leading to the transformation of the individual into the liberated yogi. So that was his introduction, and I'll just read 3, 9 to 12, what he comments on each. Yesterday, Jackie read 9, and we spoke through another sutra. Just to remind you, 9 from Pantanjali is the impressions which normally arise are made to disappear by appearance of suppressive efforts, which in turn create new mental modifications. The moment of conjunction of mind and new modifications is Nirodha Parinama. So from the Carrera translation, like the sunrise, which always overpowers the darkness of night, Nirodha unfailingly counteracts Vartana. The Sanskrit word is externalization. Our efforts are like powerful seeds that do most of their work out of sight. No effort in yoga is ever wasted. Our practices plant and nourish seeds of Nirodha, of stillness and clarity. In time, they will sprout, grow, and blossom. It is apparent that practices such as meditation, prayer, study, and self-analysis develop Nirodha. But Nirodha really gains momentum when we create the inner environment which Nirodha thrives. In practical terms, this means looking to principles of sacred wisdom as the standard by which we make choices and by which we adjust our perception of life and the world. By adopting sacred standards as our guidelines for living, we create an inner universe where fears, anxieties, and restlessness are diminished by faith, compassion, and clear, steady focus. Development in Nirodha is greatly accelerated when we live our lives guided by the principles found in the yamas and niyamas. Once we include guidelines such as these in our lives, yoga practice ceases to be limited to a couple hours a day. The advantage of this is that more and more of our thoughts and acts add to our momentum toward liberation. Number 10, from Patanjali. The flow of Nirodha Parinama becomes steady through habit. When impressions of Nirodha become strong and pervasive, the mind stuff attains a calm flow of Nirodha. This describes a mind that through regular devoted effort has achieved effortlessness in Nirodha. There is no more strain, no coercing the mind. A powerful subconscious momentum towards self-realization has been created. Such a mind finds it natural to look within for fulfillment, to be more peaceful, focused, and selfless. The doors to wisdom begin to open and faith increases. Number 11, from Patanjali. When there is a decline in distractedness and appearance of one-pointedness, then comes Samhita Parinama. From Carrera. The mind stuff transformed towards samadhi when distractedness dwindles and one-pointedness arise. As the time in Nirodha is repeated and prolonged, the mind stuff begins to lose habit of shifting attention from object to object. It is said to be attaining ekagrata, one-pointedness. One-pointedness marks the beginning of development in samadhi. Samadhi parinama. Samadhi brings significant changes in the mental environment. It's almost like renovating a house, adding a new floor, more rooms, windows, and closets. We see fresh vistas through new openings and suddenly find storage places for everything. Our newly furbished house impacts our lives on many practical and emotional levels. Similarly, the mind undergoing the transforming process of samadhi begins to operate in a state of heightened receptivity that opens it to subtle influences, knowledge, and experiences. And then finally, number 12, then again, when the subsiding past and rising present images are identical, there is ekagrata parinama, one-pointedness. From Carrera's commentary. Even when the mind has attained one-pointedness, thought waves still arise, though in a unique manner. There is a continuous flow of attention toward the object of attention, in which subsiding and arising thought waves are identical. It's like filming a bowl of fruit when neither the bowl nor the camera is moved. Each frame is indistinguishable from the last. This effect would be essentially the same as a still photograph. When the mind achieves one-pointedness, it takes the form of an object of meditation. Seer and seen become one. Even the thought, I am meditating, disappears. This idea was echoed by Saint Anthony of Egypt, known as the founder of monasticism in Christianity, when he wrote, "The prayer of the mind is not perfect until one no longer realizes himself or the fact that he is praying. The practitioner then also receives knowledge of the forces, the subtle elements, for example, that brought the object into being. Time loses its meaning in this state. We mark time essentially by noting changes. If no change is noticed, we cannot perceive the passage of time. Losing the binds of time bring us one step closer to the awareness of the eternal present." I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And Jackie read this yesterday, and if Jonathan, you want them, I can forward you these pages. But I think reading them together is helpful.
Yeah.
And I think reading additional commentary is helpful. I do think it's funny that Patanjali expects us to understand his, or that
without commentary, that he says that, you know, that they're self-explanatory and they don't need commentary. And I'm like, self-explanatory to whom?
I guess I have like questions on this, like, and I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it with you. But I'm not necessarily looking for answers to these. These are just like thoughts that come up for me, because it's like, okay, and I have two ways of, so like, okay, I get it. I get that I'm doing this work. I was put in my path and I'm doing it. But what happens if it didn't? Or like, what happens if it's not for all those other people that are out there suffering? And how can, like, I know we just keep like living by example, like, and I'm not gonna like force this in somebody's face.
Right.
But like, especially with everything that's been going on all these years, but more so now, like this major shift that's going on, I feel like the power of everyone that's been doing this work is like taking over. And I know it's like sounds silly, but like what else could be the reason? Like why now the shift? Like, and my other
I was listening to a talk.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go.
I was listening to a talk by Swami Shachanandana, and he was saying the easiest time to find peace is during a crisis. So he gives the example of fasting. He was like, someone asked me, how do I fast? And he says, do you have food at home? And the person says, no. Then he goes, how are you fasting if there's no food? Of course you're fasting, there's nothing to eat. So he goes, when you fast, when there's beautiful dishes around you, that is when you are truly fasting. So trying to find peace during a crisis is the optimal time to find peace. You don't search for yoga when the world is beautiful, when the world is peaceful, because there is peace. But when there is no peace, that's when you should seek it.
And I feel like peace and hope out there. Like, I think it's beautiful, like what's going on right now between the COVID situation and the human rights, social, political, whatever we want to call these, not issues, but changes. I think it's all for the better for all of us.
Of course.
But like so Eric's dad has, I don't know if it's one form of dementia or multiple forms of dementia, and it's getting pretty bad. And I have another neighbor that has some form of, I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or dementia, but like you just watching the memory just like slip away. And like she tells me the same story. Like she'll be like, I was in Massachusetts yesterday. And like I don't even argue with her because I know she wasn't in Massachusetts yesterday. And like that to me is so scary. That's like the samskara is taking over your mind. And like what we were talking about yesterday, Jackie, like with fear, like she sometimes goes in because she'll watch the news and she has like legit no idea what's going on some days, but then some days she's like in panic mode because she doesn't really know sometimes she doesn't know what's going on the news isn't happening outside of her house.
Right.
She thinks it's like down the block. But like and then she got confused on her husband. Like she thought it was her old bowling partner and like she came out and she was like panicking. So like I guess it's like, I guess you have to like, I guess I have to look at it as like a disease of the mind. Yeah, I guess I have to think of it as like that, where it's like your mind is affected.
It's a degeneration.
Yeah.
My grandfather had dementia, and he would tell me the same stories over, and I would sit there and listen to the point where I was telling him, no, Grandpa, like this is what you said happened, or I would still be there for him. But, I remember the original story and I would kind of cue him in like, no, and then this, and he'd go, oh yeah. And then it kind of triggers something in his memory. And then I remember my grandmother always asking, like, why are you telling the same stories? Like, why are you listening to this? And that's just what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I think sometimes Alzheimer's can also change the personality a little bit because it is affecting the brain. And so people who have been you know, outwardly kind people all their lives can all of a sudden have these bursts of anger and frustration and things that they never expressed before. I think it just alters the mind.
Because of the fear that comes up, honestly, like
Yeah.
watching them suffer, like they can't, like they're like, oh, I can't say they, I mean, I can only speak for my neighbor.
Right.
But I'm watching her, like I could see the fear in her eyes because she's not sure what is going on up there.
Right.
And it is scary. And
Yeah.
some of us live like that without having.
Yeah.
Like we're just in constant fear because we create these stories for ourselves. So like,
Right.
I guess I have to do more research on. I understand that the mind is probably, in my opinion, like the most powerful part of our body. And when it gets sick, just like when my throat gets sick and it hurts when my mind gets sick and has depression for a day, or because my sister had depression and my sister ended her own life. So like I understand mental illness is like, it's very important to me. So I believe that when the mind gets sick, like you really need to go take care of yourself. And I believe that most people don't go take care of themselves. Like when I'm sick with the sniffles and I go lay in bed for the day, when my mind is sick, I really need to go self-care for the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just so I get really worried with people that are suffering from these mental illnesses, including the Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's really just so crazy.
And I think there are some people with dementia who are in a happy place. They don't remember things, but sometimes that makes for a more peaceful and happy place. I worked for a short period of time when I was a teenager during the summer, my summer breaks from college. I worked in a rehabilitation, a tiny little cottage hospital in Scotland where it was for elderly people who had strokes, and it was rehabilitation from strokes. And there was several people who had Alzheimer's as well in there. And so it was, different, just like different people have different symptoms from the flu, different people have different symptoms from Alzheimer's too, it seems. They different ways. But I had children of some of the elderly people would come in to visit and say, she was never like this, because she had turned angry, and she was never like this. This is just what the stroke has done, or what the Alzheimer's has done to the brain. And then they would have bouts of anger. So in some cases I felt like it was really sad, and in other cases I felt like it was maybe a blessing, but singing helped. I used to sing the old songs, songs from the 40s to them, and the old Scottish songs, the old Scottish folk songs and stuff like that, and they remembered all that stuff.
I guess, that's all. I'm gonna start singing to Connie. And she's Kramer. She calls herself Kramer's grandma, so like I see her every day, and I love her so much. But it worries me. I guess it's like because we've been talking about the samskaras, I guess it's like they get stuck on the certain stories, and it happens to older people that don't have dementia too, like you were saying, Jonathan. But like my neighbors, I mean, he's like 60 or 70 years old. He tells me the same story. My grandma was the same way, and it's like, do we just get stuck? Are those samskaras, or the ones that are just stuck? And like, I guess that's what we're trying to get away from. Like, you don't want to wipe out your memories either. So I guess it's like, it is a lot of work.
That was a really interesting point, Pam. But another thing I wanted to comment on, aren't people allowed to change, even if it is for better or for worse?
Oh, yeah,
of course. Of course.
No, I'm not. I want people
Stage of your life, right?
To change, but I want them to be able to do it like willingly versus the mind taking over. That's not what we're looking for here. Where
Mm.
like people with dementia are being controlled by their mind, in my opinion. I mean, I'm no expert.
But
Right.
then where do like expectations come into that? Don't you expect someone to act a certain way, but if they don't, then you get disappointed?
Well, Jackie and I were talking on expectations yesterday, and I think the point of yoga is to have no expectations, because you really just want to like live in the moment, one breath at a time. So like when you have an expectation, you're looking into the future, and you're like we were talking about like having an impression of like a fear-based thing. Like if you get bit by a dog as a child and you then see a dog, you're going, even if you don't want to feel fear, you're expecting yourself to feel fear. And then it's the same thing, like, and then because I was thinking about this over the weekend. Okay, so we have these fear-based triggers, but what about the opposite side, like the pleasure-based triggers? So like if I have a favorite dish at a restaurant and I want to go there and I can't wait to get my favorite dish, and I go and I'm expecting it to come that way, and then it doesn't come as good as last time, like that's not yoga, because I should just go to the place, order what I want, wait for it to come, and then when it comes, just enjoy it. Like we put too much pressure on ourselves. And like we were even speaking to like, okay, you're planning an event and you're expecting it to go one way, and then it rains. Like we can't even control the weather and we're expecting things. And like you can place, we didn't speak about people, but yeah, like you can speak to people. But like I think that's kind of sad, Jackie, that if someone's suffering from an illness and their children think it might be for the better because the person is acting a certain way, but is still suffering, I mean, that's not right either.
Well, it would appear, from my experience, it appeared as if some of them were suffering, and it appeared like some of them were not. They were just blissfully going from day to day. It just seemed like they were not. And I also spent quite a big course before I was a teacher. I used to run group homes for developmentally disabled people, and I saw the same there. Now, you don't know what's going on in someone else's mind, so that's me putting a judgment onto someone else's mind. But what I saw was when I ran the homes for people who were severely and profoundly retarded. I know now we don't use that word, intellectually disabled. But those people were so they were like children. Even though they were adults, they were like children. Some of them nonverbal, but they went through their lives. They had their routines, and they went through their lives, and they didn't seem to be upset by their disability. And then I also ran a group home where everybody was mildly retarded, and so that was a very different home. And some of those adults were working in the community, in supervised jobs, or they worked in a center for people who had disabilities, because they were able to function. When you looked at them, you wouldn't necessarily know that they were retarded. Some of them even having conversations, they may appear a little slow, but they really struggled. They really struggled with their disability because they knew that they were different. Because they had capacity to know, it was so much worse for them. It was. What's that?
Because we told them they were, and we expected things of them.
Right.
Like we put that pressure on them.
And unfortunately, they had to deal with the outside world in a different way, and sometimes other people would be mean to them.
Yeah.
And they would come back and be devastated. They would come back to the home, and their counseling sessions would be, they would just be devastated because they were out in the world and they had to deal with this limited capacity that they had. And it was heartbreaking for them. Meanwhile, the people who were more severely disabled didn't have that. They just went about their life and didn't have they were blissfully ignorant of their own situation.
Well, and they didn't have the externalization, the word that kept coming up.
Yeah.
They didn't have us being like that healthy mind.
The world putting expectations on them. They weren't aware of it.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like we put too much let me say, all right, so I'll stop.
Yeah.
But like I expect everyone to act like I act. So if someone's in front of me and doesn't have the same mind as me, which no one does because we all have unique minds, I can't expect that person to act the way I'm acting. It goes back to that quote where it's like, I just have to walk around, and I believe this, that everyone's doing the best they can with the tools they have.
Yes, absolutely.
Whatever. Yeah, so I do think
we keep doing the best we can until we know better, and then we do better, right? We keep going back to that quote because it's the truth. I was just talking to my mom on the phone on Skype yesterday and having the same conversation, that's all we can do, and it's all we can hope for others as well. Yeah. But getting back to the meditation piece, getting back to this with the levels of meditation and the samskaras, I found this interesting that they're saying that even when you're in this point of meditation where you feel like, because I haven't gotten there, so I don't have the experience to speak to. I'm still working on concentration. And sometimes I'm still working on complete relaxation. Because there's times when I've spoken about it recently, that I've realized my breath is sometimes constricted, and so that's where my focus is. That's what my concentration is on losing the constrictions in different parts of my body of the breath. But if I'm to try and understand that there's a point that comes where you're not aware of the samskaras, the ongoing everyday ones, because I still, they're still popping into my brain during the concentration, and I try to refocus, and I focus, and all right, and there I was planning the day again. Okay, come back to where I am. There comes a point where you're not doing that, but actually it's still samskaras. It's just a different kind of samskaras that you're creating. You're creating this one-pointed samskara. You're creating this ability to have the movie reel going on, but it's just the same thing over and over and over again. That's such a beautiful analogy. I really liked that. Wow, wouldn't that be great? It's the first time that I've thought, oh, I would really like to get there. So up until now in my meditation practice, I've been quite happy to do the concentration and do whatever I'm do each day, just deal with whatever comes each day, and just sitting quietly and still for 20 minutes has been wonderful. It changes the day. Yeah. So that's enough for me. The fact that I see the difference in my day, in myself, that's a reason to do it, without the goal of achieving enlightenment, without the goal of, having this one-pointed or having any of those things that Amanda talks about, experiences and medication. No goals. But this actual piece, talking about it, I've actually gone, wow, I actually would really like that. I would like to be able to have that experience of it just being that one frame.
Yeah.
Without, that would probably be amazing. It's never happened, but it would probably be amazing.
And you're not putting any expectations on it. And I love this idea that yoga isn't 20 minutes of meditation or 75 minutes on the mat. It becomes your day. Like, I'll catch myself and be like, I didn't do any yoga last week. but I did so much yoga because I was so present.
Right.
And that really, and like Jackie, you might find, like, we sit for 20 minutes to practice that one pointed, so that when we go throughout our day, you might find yourself in the most comfortable position, sitting on a park bench, enjoying nature, and catch that 1 minute.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it may not happen
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
on our 20 minutes in the morning. This is just our practice to help, like you said, recreate some scars, like create almost like a healthy
Right.
aura,
Right.
so that when we catch ourselves in the rest of the minutes throughout our day, we are living a life of yoga, of being completely present and creating healthy samskaras to the best of our ability, letting go of expectations.
Right.
Jonathan saying, and like samskaras, I guess, are the past, and expectations are the future. So it's
Yeah.
like creating that one pointed present mind.
Yes.
It's the journey, it's the self-realization, it's staying present throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Even when you're doing the dishes or laundry, or walking the dog,
Right.
bringing the dog to get groomed, you're just focusing on that one task, just like you were saying, like just like one frame at a time, one breath.
Yeah.
All right, so I know it's already 8:15. Does anyone want to say anything before we move into breath and our meditation? That was a good chat. Thanks, guys. So finding a comfortable shape, we'll do a few rounds of alternate nostril breathing, and then taking what we learned today and practicing it in our concentration / meditation practice. And you might set an intention for the meditation. You might choose to dedicate your meditation today to somebody who is suffering. And if you need to find any movement in the body to make yourself comfortable, the 20 minutes doesn't have to look like a perfect Buddha statue. So taking a few minutes to get yourself comfortable. First, we'll start with alternate nostril breathing, strong, straight spine, breathing in through both nostrils, breathing out through both nostrils, beginning to lengthen the breath. Notice the breath. Feel it filling up the low belly. And then pulling belly button down to spine, letting all the air out. Letting your left palm rest in your lap, pulling the right hand up. You'll use your right thumb to close right nostril, right ring finger to close left. We'll do 3 rounds together, and then I'll set the timer for 20 minutes. It's up to you if you want to continue with a few more rounds, or however you choose to transition into your meditation today. If you need to set your own timer and drop, totally fine. So closing right, inhaling left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left, breathing deeply. Close left, exhaling right completely. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. I'm setting the timer, transitioning your own way. Bringing your hands together in front of your heart. Namaste.
Thanks, Pam and Jackie.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Later.